I'm sure you've heard of the Stoics before, the philosophers of ancient Rome, from an emperor like Marcus Aurelius, to a former slave like Epictetus, to a statesman like Seneca. Men from opposite ends of the social order who all arrived at the same discipline, all circling the same conviction. That there is a right way to live, written into the order of the universe itself, and your task is simply to find it and follow it. And then, almost 18 centuries later, one man walked out of that same European tradition and set it on fire. Friedrich Nietzsche, a man who spent most of his life sick and alone, scribbling in notebooks in boarding houses across Switzerland and Italy. He looked at the foundations Western civilization had been standing on for 2,000 years and declared them cracked beyond repair. Where the Stoics saw order, he saw a void. Where they saw a universe handing down purpose, he saw an empty sky. Two philosophies, two men who never met, separated by 1,800 years, and yet if you put their ideas in a room together, they would go to war. Today, we're refereeing that war. We'll do it by asking 3 questions that every human being eventually has to answer, and seeing how each philosophy responds. By the end, we'll find out which one actually leads toward the good life, or maybe which parts of each one do. Is there inherent meaning in life? Let's start with the Stoics. Their answer is a firm, unshaken yes. The universe isn't chaos wearing a disguise. It has order and purpose, a rational structure they called the logos, running through everything like a current beneath the surface. Animals have their nature, trees have their nature, and humans have reason. That's ours, uniquely. Living well means living in agreement with it. That belief cashes out into something very concrete. Do your duty fully. Discipline yourself. Be generous. Be kind to everyone you meet, because that's simply what it means to be a rational, social creature living in tune with a rational, ordered cosmos. Respect other people because they're expressions of that same order you are. For the Stoic, meaning isn't something you invent. It's something you discover. Already sitting there in the structure of reality, waiting for you to notice it. It's worth remembering that this wasn't a comfortable belief for the people who held it. Marcus Aurelius wrote his private reflections on military campaigns, while plague swept through the empire he was responsible for. Epictetus built this entire worldview while he was someone else's property. These weren't men with the luxury of believing in order. They looked directly at chaos and chose to see structure in it anyway. And then Nietzsche showed up. He looked at that entire framework and saw a corpse still standing upright, twitching out of habit. His claim is brutal. There is no given, inherent meaning. The old foundation, the divine, a fixed cosmic purpose, meaning handed down from above, has collapsed. Everything you thought was objective is actually subjective, a value someone made up and handed down as if it were law. And realizing this isn't a tragedy. It's a door. The moment you truly see that nothing is fixed is the exact moment you're free to become something superior, to create your own values instead of inheriting someone else's. That's the Übermensch. But here's the part that gets him branded a monster. He didn't think all kindness was noble. Some of it, he argued, wasn't virtue at all. It was resentment wearing a mask. The powerless, unable to compete with the strong on strength's own terms, invented a moral system where weakness became virtue and strength became sin, and then convinced everyone, including the strong, to believe it. He called that slave morality. Willtopower is his answer to it. Discard the herd's inherited rules, replace them with something else entirely, the drive to grow, overcome yourself, and create values you consciously choose, answerable to no one but yourself. The divide is stark. One man says meaning is given. The other says meaning must be made, because nothing was ever given at all. How should one deal with suffering? This is where philosophy stops being abstract and starts being personal. Because this isn't really about ancient texts anymore. It's about your worst Tuesday. The diagnosis you didn't see coming. The failure you replay at 2 a.m. The Stoic answer, withstand it. Not by pretending it doesn't hurt, but deliberately. Control what's actually yours to control. Your judgments, responses, and choices. Release your grip on everything else. The event itself isn't what breaks you. Your interpretation of the event is. Master that, and you've mastered the only thing that was ever truly yours to master. This is the whole idea. Sorting the universe into two piles, the things that answer to your will and the things that don't, and refusing to waste a single ounce of suffering on the second pile. Nietzsche agrees for about 3 seconds, and then splits hard in a different direction. Don't just withstand suffering, use it. He believed comfort makes people small and soft, and that real suffering is often the exact pressure that forges something extraordinary. The man who has withstood and been forged by pain is reborn into a being greater, beyond the herd's rule. Ideology no longer shapes him. Borrowed opinion, mediocrity, none of it dictates his steps. That man walks through the sheep of mediocrity like a force apart, a real Ubermensch. He'd look at a culture obsessed with avoiding discomfort and see civilizational decay. A species so terrified of pain that it forgot pain was ever useful for anything. So the Stoic meets the storm with a steady hand and lets it pass through him. Nietzsche, on the other hand, walks directly into the storm, convinced that's the only place real strength gets built. They shared the same enemy, but chose two different tactics. And notice what both of them refuse to tell you. Neither says, avoid it. Two completely different philosophies, born 18 centuries apart, arrive at the exact same non-negotiable. You go through it. There is no around. How does the pinnacle of the good life look like? The Stoics would say this. A man wakes before the city does, and he's already rehearsed the day's obstacles in his mind before his feet hit the floor. An employee who keeps missing deadlines. A competitor undercutting his prices just to steal customers away. He knew the world was never promised to be easy. He gives his best in every hour, working as if this were the last task he'll ever be given, with quiet contentment for the responsibility placed in his hands. At noon, someone insults him in front of others, out of nothing but jealousy. He doesn't flinch or retaliate. He simply lets the insult pass through him, like wind through an open door. At night, he sits with his family, tends to his hobbies, and finds himself grateful for all the smallest moments as a kind of quiet blessing. He does this rather than chasing anything for vain or ill pleasure. Before sleep, he writes a few honest lines about where he fell short that day to recalibrate himself. And then he sleeps, peacefully, because nothing that happened to him today ever touched the one thing he guarded, his own judgment. Nietzsche, on the other side, would say this. A man wakes up at dawn, too, but there's no rehearsal for what the day might throw at him. He already knows the day belongs to him. In the morning meeting, he says the one thing everyone else in the room was too afraid to say, not to provoke, but because he actually believes it, and he'd rather be resented for the truth than liked for a lie. His employee mocks him for it behind his back. He hears about it by noon, but he simply doesn't care. The herd's opinion doesn't move him. Their approval was never his to chase. Every piece of work he touches, he pours his passion and his inner artist into creating something beyond what anyone imagined, demolishing every rule and precedent in his path until it's completely, unmistakably his own. By afternoon, he learns a project he poured a year into has collapsed, undone by forces outside his control. He treats it as raw material, already turning the failure over in his mind, looking for what it can be forged into next. At night, he spends time with the people he loves, but never out of obligation, only because he genuinely wants to be there, and that's precisely what makes it real. Before sleep, he doesn't ask whether he did enough today by anyone else's measure. He asks only one thing: was any part of this borrowed, and did I burn it away? Then he sleeps, fully, the way someone sleeps after a day spent entirely, unmistakably his own. 2 men, 2 mornings, 2 nights. One walks in the light of order and strength. The other burns in the fire of self-created meaning. And now that we have gone through these 2 philosophies, let us have the resolution. To do that, we shall bring up a third party, Fyodor Dostoevsky. He wrote a character named Raskolnikov, a young and brilliant person who talks himself into something startlingly Nietzschean before Nietzsche had even fully articulated it. The theory that certain extraordinary people stand above conventional morality, that the rules exist for the herd, not for him. So he tests it. He commits murder to prove the theory true. And what follows isn't liberation, but collapse. Paranoia eats him alive. Guilt he swore he was too enlightened to feel drowns him anyway. The self-authored man, cut loose from anything beyond his own will, doesn't ascend, he disintegrates. That's not proof that Nietzsche is wrong about everything, but it is a warning shot aimed straight at the idea that morality, fully unmoored from anything beyond the self, holds together under real pressure. Something underneath Raskolnikov's theory already knew the murder was wrong before he committed it. That something is worth paying attention to, which points at the deeper crack in the slave morality argument. Is empathy really just dressed up resentment? When the instinct to treat someone the way you'd want to be treated rises up in you completely unprompted, is that the weak quietly plotting revenge on the strong? Or is it just true? Virtue tends to build a life that holds together. Vice tends to hollow one out from the inside. That pattern shows up too often, in too many people with nothing to gain from faking it, to wave away as resentment wearing a disguise. But Nietzsche isn't simply wrong, and not just an isolated pessimist with nothing real to offer. He's right that the herd isn't automatically right. Crowds have justified horrifying things in the name of everyone agrees. He's right that striving high is great, but only within the Stoic framework of a divine, objective order, not trespassing beyond it. He's right that transforming suffering into something meaningful is powerfully human, and that the world's chaos isn't a delusion. For many, that's just Tuesday. What Nietzsche truly wanted was for people to stop sleepwalking through borrowed convictions they never once tested. Strip away the aggressive language, and what's left is advice most of us would recognize as genuinely good. Know what you actually believe. Live like your values are yours, not a costume someone handed you at birth. And so, standing between a philosopher who says the order was already written into the universe and one who says you have to write it yourself, perhaps the final synthesis is this: embrace and endure suffering as both men taught you to. Root yourself in virtue and the good of others, as the Stoics did, and still walk the path only you could walk, lit by your own love, forged by your own creativity, as Nietzsche did. And most importantly, start now. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this philosophical clash, there will be more coming up from now on. So subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you in the next one.